So there's one there from David over class.
Everyone's here. So today we're going to do a little bit more of the modeling stuff, and hopefully by the end of today's digital work session, you should have most of the skills you need to complete the assignment that we have for the second half of the semester. I know you guys are leaving for field studies, so you're going to forget everything. That's okay, because that's why we record the presentation so that you cannot forget. So there is no excuse. You can't say, I forgot what you showed us, because you can always rewatch everything. So if you want to follow along, what I put into our box folder, I put a Rhino model right here. So this time I'm actually giving a Rhino model. This is basically a completed Rhino model, more or less, with a few things that we're going to work on. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And then there's this new textures folder that I posted in here, textures 2. And there's a few textures in here that we're going to play with in today's demonstration. So some textures here. And so again, if you don't follow along today, again, you can follow along afterwards. Everything that you need is in these folders here. So what I'm going to try to attempt to show you guys today is how to work on a model that is kind of within, I would say, kind of like a forested swamp context, purely because I presented the option of potentially working on your studio site as a way to do this assignment. And so if I'm going to suggest that as an assignment, I have to at least tell you how to do that, because the swamp is a very different context to try to attempt to model. So this is what, let me put the model up real quick. And I'll briefly go over what it is I've given you. So if you've opened the model and you downloaded it, this is what you'll see. This is a Boardwalk design that I kind of like messed with. It's a design that I worked on a few years ago, and then I took the detail from that and I modeled it in this really quickly. And basically, it's a boardwalk detail that utilizes precast concrete planks. So that's what this red piece right here represents. It's a nice material to use for boardwalks, and this is not really related to the modeling stuff, but just as a kind of a detail lesson. Instead of using wood for a deck, you can use precast concrete. What that allows you to do is allows you to basically build a deck without the need for joists, because you can see here basically it's the footings, the beam, and then literally the decking lays on top of the beams. And the reason that's possible is because since the precast concrete deck, it just like literally has the rigidity and does not buckle under the pressure. So you don't actually need any joists when you building a precast concrete deck. It's also a very durable surface material. So if you are worried about longevity, this is a good material to use. And then also what is on top of this deck is a custom bench. And so basically what this bench detail here is a basically a steel pipe that is a custom fabricated to kind of represent the profile of a bench, and it's clad in wood. So it's a very simple detail. This is basically you can design this if you want. Like this is a design that this is Frank's design. If you wanted to criticize a Frank bench detail, we put a little gap at the bottom of the detail to basically, in instances of flood events, water can basically flow underneath, and then if like there's leaves and debris, they can just be washed away easily. So that's why there's a little gap at the base of it. But more or less, it's just a steel tube that's custom fabricated and clad in wood. And then all around the corner of this, there's a basic railing detail as well, with a wood top rail with metal cable railings in between. So it's a very simple deck detail. And what we are going to try to finish is modeling this within the context of a wooded context. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these elements that we're going to model. But if I move to a rendered view in this model here, you kind of see what we're trying to go for is basically this deck within sort of a kind of a naturalistic ground plane with kind of a surface of water on it. We'll talk about how that water will be rendered in a second. And then that integrated within a column of trees, essentially. So let me actually, I mean, this is one, there's no, we're gonna put textures on these trees in a second. If I go to a different viewport here, you'll see what that looks like in more detail. But basically what we're gonna go for, and again, the reason I'm doing this is because, again, you know, if I'm going to suggest you can do your studio assignment with this assignment, you gotta know how to model the swamp, because all you guys are in the swamp for some reason. Literally what I did last night, and you can laugh at me for this, I went on the Instagram and I downloaded all these photos of you guys, because I didn't go with you to the swamp, so I don't know what the swamp looked like. So I went on the Instagram and I found the swamp photos, and this is what I'm trying to replicate. And this is the difficulty. So these look like bald cypresses to me. That's what okay, so that is the assumption I went on when I was looking for like the tree bark textures, something like that. Like this is a really nice view, and then the ground cover. So this is kind of what I kind of am going for. And so the end results of that whole process was something like this. That's hopefully what we can try to replicate at the end of today's tutorial, basically this deck detail. So this is your design within a context that looks kind of like, you know, a natural condition. So with that, let me get going on that. And let's see. So in this model here, let's start with this model. Let me just try to maximize some of the stuff. I'll lock this to the side here. So today I'm not going to talk too much about the modeling stuff. The modeling stuff, like actual extrusion and all that stuff, was covered in the previous workshop. Today we're going to focus on some more detailed elements, such as modeling the ground surface, modeling these trees, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about applying some special textures, and then finally get into exporting this out into a model view. So the first thing I want to cover real quick first is I'm going to zoom into this. In your guys' case, if you don't have a model, if you don't have this textured view, you can always just go to a rendered view like this, and you'll basically be able to see the textures. If you don't have the rendered view open, you probably have a shaded view and you won't see the textures. I create my own custom views that allow me to see the textures, but without having to render the shadows or anything. So it's actually a little bit more of a faster workflow. If you don't know how to do that, basically what you can do is you can go to, say, for instance, a shaded view like this. And then in the viewport on the side here, go to this thing called display options down here when you go here. And then what you can do once this window pops up is you can go into the material right here. And if you choose rendering material, that should, as you can see, put the actual material onto the element itself. So if you see that what happened now is that now it just shows the material. So that's a good way to do that. If you don't have that, it goes to just objects color, which is what it was here. Okay. So I already created my own custom view that allows me to see this. So I'm going to cover this again. I showed you this in the previous workshop, but basically, if you look at this wood texture right here, you see how the grain of the wood is in the wrong direction. You know, it's running in this direction when it should run in that direction. So we need to just fix the map for this. So the way you do that, right now, all these elements are grouped together. So when I select this here, it's selecting all 6 boards at the same time. If it's not grouped, you know, it'll be like this, where you can select one at a time, like so. But if they're not grouped, you can select them all together, then hit Control G on your keyboard, and then it groups them all together. It just makes it a little bit easier to manage the model. And then what we're going to do is, while this is selected, we're going to go to this Properties button in the tab the properties tab up there, go to this texture mapping button right there. And then we're going to choose the planar mapping option right there. It's the fourth button from the left. We're two right of the rubber ducky. So click on that guy. And then what you can basically do is you can draw a 3-point rectangle that represents the projection of that texture on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to, after we choose that, choose the 3-point option there. Then choose one corner. So basically we're going to snap to this corner right there. If you're not snapping, make sure that the check boxes down the base of Rhino are checked so that you have at least endpoints checked. So then you can snap to the endpoint here, and then go to the endpoint there. And then you see what you do is basically draw a 3-point rectangle, which allows you to draw the top of the surface right there. And then when it asks for UV or UVW, just hit UV. And then what that does now is it just basically projects a texture onto that surface. And then what you can do is after it's projected on the surface, you can go to this Uvw Repeat thing right here. And then you can basically repeat the texture. You can tile it a few times if you want more density to it. So just play with those numbers and see what happens. So if I put a 2 there, you see what it does. It like kind of doubles the texture in the vertical direction. If I put a 2 in the second line, it doubles the textures again in this direction. It's hard to see, but that's what happened. So you just play with those numbers to essentially just give the texture a little bit more gradient and a little bit more density if you want. So that's how you apply textures. But then what happens is basically, if I look at on these other surfaces here, these surfaces still need to have their textures applied. There's a quick little shortcut you can do. So let's do this face first, because this face here is similar in terms of the texture projection as that face. What you can do is you can select the object that you want to change the texture for, and then in the texture mapping window, there is this brush right there that says match mapping right there. You can click on that brush, and then select an object that has already been in texture, has already a texture applied to it. Then what it does is essentially it matches the mapping. So it's a very subtle change, but that's a nice, easy way to adjust that. And then for, say, for instance, this surface here, we can do the exact same thing. So what I'll do is I will click on this, choose match mapping, click on that guy. And you see what happens is it doesn't look quite right. That's because the projection of the texture is like projection in this general direction. So it's actually kind of like hitting this surface at a very stark angle. So what you can do is while this is selected, you can choose this show mapping option right there. And that reveals essentially that projection. So then what you can do is you can take this projection, move it around, or more importantly, just rotate it. So I'll just click on this green arrow here to rotate that thing, and then just rotate it 90 degrees. So that just rotates that projection 90 degrees. So that's what texture mapping is, essentially this projection of a texture of an image onto a surface, and it provides literally the texture for it. And then once you're done with that, you can just basically, you can select the object, and then you can just choose this button here called hide, and that hides the little widget there. So I'm gonna do that real quick for the next two textures. So this one right here, we'll assume just do match like that. This top object here, we just match that. So very simple. It just shows that basically texture mapping is something that you can do really easily, and just taking the time to just fix the textures and making sure that they're scaled correctly, make sure they look good, isn't that hard to do. This is the step that a lot of entry-level model makers, beginner model makers forget to do, or they just neglect to do because they just think it looks good enough. But that detail is important to try to get right, because then it actually looks literally like the material that you're trying to render. So that's what I want to cover first, was just the basics of mapping textures again. The second thing I'm going to cover, so and then everything else in this model is already should be textured correctly. I just wanted to texture this one object again one more time, but everything else in this model should already be mapped perfectly fine. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to turn off all these other elements on the side here, so that we only have this precast bench layer turned on for now. I'll lock this layer by just choosing the lock button right there, so that you can't accidentally select it. I want to talk about how I made this this ground surface here, right? So this ground surface kind of represents the ground floor of the swamp. And, you know, generally speaking, like you'll never find like a perfectly flat spot. There's always like small little depressions, small little, you know, areas of wetness, dryness, that kind of thing. And so how do you create a surface that has this kind of character to it, where it's just has a little bit of a undulation to it, where it's just not even, it's not perfectly flat. You can create a perfectly flat surface, but that just looks really weird. And so how can you make a surface that's more naturalistic? And so off to the side of this model here, actually not off to the side, down here, there's a layer called ground curves. You probably should see, let me see, there's a bunch of these curves here. Let me do this. Let me delete that first. You probably see a bunch of these like curves on here in your model. I can't remember. Is that what you're seeing? Something like this? The curves like this. So basically what we're going to do is, what you can do is draw like curvilinear curves on the edge of the kind of the area that you want to turn to a surface. And you can use a tool called network surface to really easily create a kind of like an undulating surface. So without getting too much into it, let me do this first. I think I might have left a few curves on that I didn't want. Let me just do this first. Let me do this. I'll just take this here. I'll move it to the side for now. So basically what I did was, you know, we took a bunch of curves and just drew a simple undulation. I basically went into a plan or an elevation view on the bottom here, front and right, and basically just drew a curve like so. And if you can draw a condition like this, where you have like 4 curves like this, you can just use the tool called network surface, and that just really quickly creates kind of an undulating surface that kind of has like a you know, a corrugated kind of undulating topography to that. It's a very easy way to, you know, create a naturalistic surface. You can also use other tools as well. Does that make sense? Do you want me to dive into this a bit more, or do you guys get it? I mean, basically, I'm kind of skipping over a few things. Like I didn't draw literally this curve and this curve here because I assume by this point that's not an issue how to draw a curve. But if you had like the topo, if you had the topo, you can do that too. Again, you can, though for this exercise, it may not be that necessary to get into that level of detail, simply because we're only dealing with one little portion of it. It's probably more trouble than it's worth to model, but you can if you want. If you actually have a survey of the site, which you probably don't, you can do that. But basically our goal, let me turn off these curves here, is to basically create a surface that looks kind of like that. And this was generated simply through that network surface tool that I showed you guys. And then what I did on that surface here was I applied a kind of like a ground cover to it. And so I believe I put a ground cover texture in the folder. And so that just allows you to put that texture on. So again, it's the same thing, just plain old texture mapping. Just use that planar mapping tool, then just tile it a few times. One thing that you will notice about this texture is that it mirrors. You see how it mirrors, like when it matches a seam. This is a technique you can maybe play around with. So I'll show you what that basically means, is that when you're creating the texture in Rhino, so you remember this tab, this button right here next to the layer right there. If you go to the material options of in this case, this ground cover texture, this is where, remember, we set the bitmap for the texture. If you click on this thing here, there's an option to mirror tiles right there, that box right there. If I uncheck that box, I click OK, I see where it does it. It tiles it. So sometimes this looks better. Sometimes the mirroring looks better. It just depends on what the texture is. you know, in this case, I thought the mirroring looked a little bit better, so that's why I had this checked. So you can play with that checkbox there if, you know, you're thinking the texture just looks a little bit too tiley and you want to just give a little bit of variation. Now, the only issue with this is that it creates monsters and spiders and scary looking demons in the image. So just kind of try to ignore these like scary looking forms. Oh my God, I think I see like the.
Maybe add like spaces with two textures.
Okay, so 2 textures. So what I did also is there's a ground 2, and that's like a second layer on top of this. What I basically did to create this, so you know, to create a bit more of a varied ground plane, that just gets a little, you just have to be a little creative in how you basically create new areas of ground. And so I'm going to show you a method that I use. Basically what I did was I took this ground plane here. What I did was I created a new layer and I select this object, right clicked on this, then choose this thing called copy objects to layer. So what that does is it just copies this to that surface there. And then what I basically did was with that selected, I just simply scaled this. I just scaled it like that in the Z direction. See, if I scale it like really intensely, it just creates a really intense surface. But if you scale it very subtly, like so, like this, you see it kind of like pops out of the surface just a little bit like so. And then what you can maybe do is you can rotate it maybe. So if you wanted to, you can select this here and maybe rotate by 1 degree. You know, just anything you want to just add a little bit of variation to the surface. What we're trying to create is the appearance of randomness. So then basically what I did is after you kind of do something like that, what you can do is you can type in the split command, then split this adjusted surface. So I type in split, choose this object, hit enter, then split it by the original surface. So I have to unlock that layer to do that. And then what basically you get is this new surface that's kind of like an additional layer on top of it. So that's how I did. And then everything that's below the old surface, you can just delete that. So this is how I created ground 2. And then just put a texture on top of that. So the goal is to basically create kind of like an uneven ground plane. Any questions on, let me delete this one because I don't need that, on this method of creating a ground plane? Before I move on to the other things. I'm trying to go through this really fast because we only have an hour and a half. And that's actually not that much time for a digital tutorial. So what we're going to do also is, what I also did as well was I placed onto the surface a bunch of planting material. So in this Enscape assets folder right here, if I turn that on, you'll see all these Enscape blocks. So if you remember what and how to place actual assets onto the model here, what you need to do is you need to create some layers to host the assets. So like a layer called vegetation. That's what I created right there. Set that to be your current layer. Then go to the asset library of Enscape. And this is where you can drop in your planting material or any, people, scale figures, that kind of thing. So I'll just try to find a quick asset to drop in there. So like, for instance, you want to put a birch. I don't think there's any birches in this forest, but whatever, we'll just put one. And we just click on the surface, and basically what it does is it just plops it into the model right there. And in this case, it's kind of scaled really hugely, but you get the point, is that you can just do that. So I did that a few times with this ground cover grass. And what's a nice thing to do is basically after you put it a few times, just basically select a few of the blocks that represent the grass, just copy it across the model. So a really quick way to copy objects in Rhino is if you have the gumball turned on. The gumball is this RGB arrow widget here that allows you to move stuff. If you have that turned on, if you don't have it turned on, it's this button down here, gumball button down here. If that's not selected, when you select objects, they don't have the thing turned on. When that's turned on, if you move an object somewhere else in the model, And before you let go of the mouse to click it, you pick your other finger and your other hand, because you have two hands, and you hit the alt key on your keyboard. You see there a little plus icon like shows up. That's a really quick way to like, oops, let me do that one time. And I just realized, you know, I'm probably being offensive to people who have only one hand. So I apologize. Because not everyone has two hands. Insensitive, I'm sorry. But that's an easy way to quickly copy and paste elements. So you can see it's actually pretty easy once you get going to just populate the model with ground cover. Okay, so that was the creation of this portion of the base right here. It was just to get to this point where you have basically the ground cover with this undulation and then all this planting material in the model. So now what I'm going to talk about is the modeling of a tree. And so this was a tricky thing for me, because trees tend to be difficult to render and model notoriously. And so it does take a level of a like understanding of what the tree actually looks like. And so, you know, I was looking at these images here of the swamp here, not the ones with you guys hugging, because you're like blocking the tree, so it's like hard to see the tree. But like this is a nice image here because there's no people in it, except for this ghost in the background. So you know, you can kind of see like the base of the tree kind of has this kind of interesting like in and out form to it, because it's really kind of cool, almost curtain-like look to it, and then it kind of looks converges as it goes up. So that's kind of the geometric shape if we want to model this bald cypress tree. Like that's kind of what we want to try to emulate when we were doing this work here. So what the method that I think would be good to use is the Loft tool in Rhino. So what I have in the model here, there's a layer called tree curves. If you turn that layer on, tree curves layer, you'll see basically the elements of the tree model. So basically what we have is a series of rings that kind of represent the diameter of the tree as it goes up in elevation, where the base of the tree, you can see here, kind of has that kind of curtain-like shape to it. And all I literally did was, you know, I drew a circle that kind of represents the general area. Then I just picked the control point curve there and just drew a squiggle, right? And so that's all it is. Then when you click the starting point, it just closes that squiggle right there. So let's just do this. So I'll take this curve I drew, and let's just use that. Let me just scale it a little bit down, because that felt right to me, was to be about that scale there. I'll hide this previous one. And then basically what you can do, and you know, if you don't like the profile of this, you can just turn on the points, control points on that. So I'll type in PON to turn on the control points, and then you can go into the base of the tree here, and you can adjust the geometry font. So then what you do is actually, after you're satisfied enough with the shape, you're also going to need to draw a few more rings that represent the radius of the tree as it goes up, like I said. Then what you do is you need to select these radiuses in the order that they are going to loft. So you can't select them like 1, 2, 3, 4. If you do that and type in loft, well, it worked. I don't know why. I guess it's pretty smart. I guess it's pretty smart. Did it work? All right, I guess it worked. Well, originally what I was going to say was just you select them generally in the order that you want to loft them. So bottom to top, then type in the tool loft. And that basically creates this shape here. What you can do is you can play around with these style options here. So right now it's set to normal. What's kind of creating, you can kind of see this is not a very nice look, is this kind of, which trees don't do that. They don't have a trunk that's like that. They just tend to kind of like, they generally trying to converge in terms of its in terms of its tree caliper. So you can choose this thing called loose here, and that just makes it a little bit looser. And so it doesn't strictly tie to the curves. It kind of loosens up. So it kind of creates a bit more of an even loft. So that's what that looks like. So not, in my opinion, not a perfect tree, but better than a, let's just put it, better than a stick, better than a cylinder. At least, you know, you can put a little bit of effort into the shape of the tree. So I did this. If you turn on the trees 1 and trees 2 layer, basically, you know, I created that and I just copied and pasted it across the entire, I can turn this one off, delete that guy. I'll turn the tree curves off. I just copied and paste that across the entire field here. Then one thing I did as well, if I go to say like, let's go to a front view and just kind of look at this. One thing that you'll notice is that the trees aren't all perfectly straight. What you should do if you do this kind of work is you should take the trees and you should like choose them, like select one, then choose the rotation option in the gumball here, just choose that. Then just rotate like 1 degree in either direction. So just type in 1 or -1. So in this case, I just put in 1, like just that. That subtle little adjustment like makes it look less weird. So this one here, I'll do -1. You know, so that's how you kind of create that kind of forested look, is having nothing look perfectly perfect, right? Just having a little bit of variation in the thing. And it's like a small subtle thing, but it makes a huge difference when you're actually rendering this in the model. So I did that a few times on the trees. And then, you know, I kind of chopped it off at the top here because, you know, the rendering is only going to be of this space here, so you actually don't need to necessarily model the canopy. If you really want to model the canopy, we can get into that individually with one of you in the future. But for the purposes of this exercise, the tree trunk itself is fine. Okay, any questions about how to get to this stage here at all? It's pretty easy, right? Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put a texture on this tree. And so in the folder here, I put a few bark textures. So that's what these are here. Then I also put, this is just a picture of the trunk of a bald cypress that I just got from the internet. I just placed it in there because I want to show you guys real quickly is how to, you know, take your own pictures of trees and, you know, create your own textures from that. So you can, you know, just find, you know, tree bark textures on the internet. But sometimes you actually just want to like take your own picture of your own tree and you want to turn that to a texture. So you can download, if you want to follow me along, just download this one here. This is when I'm going to show you guys how to edit. And that's just a few simple Photoshop tricks. So I'll open that in here in Photoshop. So this is the thing, and I feel dumb for saying this, but you guys know how to use Photoshop, right?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, this is the tool that I definitely don't need to teach you guys how to use, right? So yeah, picture. So you go out to the site, you find an amazing, you know, tree specimen, and like, I'm take a picture of that tree. That's what we do. We are landscape architects, and we're weird. We take pictures of bathing patterns, we take pictures of trees, and people stare at us and they laugh at us and say, who's that weirdo? And then we just go, oh. So what you do is you go to the crop tool, just crop that. Oops, what did I just do? Crop tool, and then we'll basically just crop. You want to find a general area of this trunk that is somewhat consistent in terms of its tone, right? So the fringes of the tree trunk are a little bit darker in shadows, so maybe trim those out a little bit. But just kind of get it like a basic texture. And then, you know, crop that guy. And then what you basically need to do is, you know, if you turn this to a texture, it will tile, but it will tile with the sides not matching. So you actually need to match the ends of the the trunk so that when he tiles, it looks somewhat seamless. So the way you do that is you go to this filter option at the top, and then at the bottom of the filter list here, there's this offset tool right there. So I just go to filter, offset. And then we're basically, it's a little hard to see. Let me zoom in to the model here. You can see basically what you're doing. You're just taking the image and you're just like offsetting it. But when it offsets it, it tiles it so that it fills in, you know, at the top with the bottom. So what you can do is you can use your mouse to basically like drag this around. And what you kind of sort of want to do is put the original corners of the image in the middle of the image. So this is the seam where the top once was and the bottom once was, and this is the seam where the edges were. So just kind of put that in the middle, like so. Then just click OK. And then what you need to do is you got to use Photoshop to basically like smooth out those seams. And so in Photoshop, you know, there's a few tools that you can use to do that. There's the clone stamp tool. A tool that I think is really easy is the content aware tool. So basically what you can do is you can just select an area, you know, like this right here, for instance, use the selection tool, then go to edit, fill. And then in fill, you can fill it with a color, or you can fill it with content aware pixels. And that just basically takes that, just kind of like blends it. So you just kind of just do that a few times for, you know, all the areas that were once a seam, fill, content aware. And eventually, you know, after a little bit, you can sort of like make the seams of it a little bit more consistent. And then what you might also want to do is there might be some areas like here where the tone of it is just a little bit darker than the rest of the image. So what you can do is you can say, for instance, go in with a filter like a levels filter that might increase the exposure of it just a little bit. Then put a mask on that, and then just use that mask to lighten up, you know, areas of the image. So I'm doing this really crudely, but you can kind of get a sense like that's kind of what you got to do when you are creating a seamless texture. That you can adjust it a little bit to make it look somewhat consistent. So that's how you basically take so when you go out to sites and you take pictures of textures, that's how you bring in the Photoshop and you create like seamless textures. Then you just take this image here and you export that out as a JPEG, and that's your texture. So the result of that whole process that I just did right here in the box folder, there is a bald cypress bark texture. That's what I basically created for you guys right here, is that seamless texture. Any questions about Photoshop or what I just did to create this texture? So now you know you can just go anywhere and take pictures of materials and take pictures of surfaces, and you can turn them into textures. And this is what I mean when I say, like, you know, photorealistic is a very achievable thing to get to with this project, is because you just need to take photos of your materials and you can get there. So when you're in San Francisco and you're visiting projects, you know, take photos of the materials. I don't know if they're going to give you a sketchbook assignment or anything like that, but throw the sketchbook and get the camera out, because that's a way more long-term useful. It's the photo of it. I shouldn't say that, but keep a sketchbook. It's okay. All right. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, one last thing is that whenever you're creating a texture, it's always a good idea to create what's known as a bump map. And so the easy way to do that is to basically take the image that you're creating here, put on a black and white filter like so, and then basically increase the contrast of it so that the whites are really white, you know, and the darks are really dark. Just, you know, do something like that. Maybe see if you can, yeah, something like that. And so what you're basically creating is another texture layer that when you bring it into Rhino and Enscape, you can actually add a little bit of additional texture to the material. Because right now when you're applying this texture, it's literally just wrapping on it really tightly. But a bump map actually adds a little bit of depth to the image. So a bump map is basically an image that has like a black to white gradient. So that's essentially how to create a bump map. And so in the the box folder here, I also created the bump map for this wall cypress. So we're now going to take these textures here, and we are going to go in here, and we're going to put them on these trees. So let's go on to let's start with tree 1 right there. So I'll go to this here. Let me turn off all these other layers just for now so that we can focus primarily on the trees. And I'm gonna just set trees to be my current layer. And so hopefully you guys remember how to do this, but basically what you do is you click on the material button on the side, then choose custom material. So it brings up all the custom settings, give it a name. We'll call this one tree bark 01. In the color button down here, just choose the options and assign the texture. And so I have this bald cypress texture right here. So we'll choose that. If you want to choose one of the other textures, you can. And then in the bump right there, we're going to add the bump map. And the bump map only really shows up in the rendered view. So you may not notice that much of a difference, but that's a good thing to add in there. So then click OK. And you'll see that's kind of what happens. And so then what you do basically is you choose this tree here, and then right now it looks okay. It's applying the texture using the surface as the logic, but ideally what you should do is you should put a texture map on it. So what you could, in this instance, I would recommend using the cylindrical mapping. So basically what we'll do is we'll create a little cylinder that projects it on all sides and then tiles it that way. So the way we do that is just choose this cylindrical mapping option right there. And then we'll basically choose this three-point option there. Then you can pick 3 points along the base of this shape, then choose a height. And so if you remember that texture that we did in here, it's kind of a long linear texture. So you don't need to be super precise about this, but just generally trying to like get it somewhat feeling right. In this case, it doesn't really matter if it's capped or not, so I'll just put yes for now. And that looks really weird. What happened? So let me, I think I know what's happening. Basically, I know what's happening. Basically, what's happening is that the texture is like at some points intersecting with the object itself. So because this is rotated a little bit, it's not quite a perfect cylinder. So what we might need to do is just might need to reveal this cylinder here, just make it a little bit bigger. Might need to let's go to front view and just try to rotate it a little bit like so, maybe. In this particular instance, I'm just going to undo it. This didn't quite work. So what we'll just do is we'll just simply use the surface mapping, or we'll do let's see if we can match it to that. Well, this didn't quite work out as smoothly as I thought. Let me try now. Let's try one more time. Let's do the cylindrical mapping. Let me go in the top view. In this case, I'm going to do. I'm just going to try to draw a flat circle like that. That worked a little bit better. And then what we'll do now is you can just use this repeat command. So we'll repeat it 2 times, maybe. Actually, it doesn't need to repeat in that direction, it just needs to repeat in this direction. And that's okay. And so that's basically the process of putting that texture onto the true tree. What I might recommend doing is before you copy the trees across the entire model. It may be a better technique to just texture one tree first and then copy that, because when you copy this tree, it just like copies the texture map with it. Because I didn't do that, if I say, for instance, click on this here and then choose match mapping with this, it's going to look a little bit weird first, because again, that cylinder is over here. We're going to move that cylinder over there, the cylinder that represents the texture map. So what I would do is I basically click to show mapping here and then just move it into that, like so. It's kind of a weird thing, but you know, that's essentially what this whole process. So let me do that real fast. You can make a block, yeah, that you can, you know, basically this is one thing that you can copy and paste across, and then if you change it, change one, you can change them all. So that's a really good technique. Just take this here, type in block, and then you basically create an element that's a block, call this tree.
But you know what, I think you can actually change the size or the scale a lot. Like you cannot change, like you want.
Basically what Maria Elena is saying is basically we're creating a block. You guys know what block? Raise your hand if you don't know what a block is. Just okay, a few of you. Half of you are like super advanced, and half of you are less advanced. So when I say you know who needs help, most of you guys don't raise your hand because you probably know. Basically, this is not now a block. So what that means is if I make a copy of this, I'll just make a copy of this. What I can do is if I select this object here, type in block edit, that puts me into this editing mode here. And then what I can do is I can take this here and I can say I want to do that. Something really dumb. And then what happens is that all the other blocks like change with it, or put a branch on it. Like I go to block edit. Take this here. I'm gonna do a really dumb thing. We'll just do that. Do that. Do that. I'm trying to create a quick branch. It's not a very good branch. Okay, so you create a little Pinocchio branch, like so. And click OK. That's what creating a block is. So good call, Maria Elena. Yes, you can do that. Smarter technique than what I did. So just pretend like I did that for these ones out here. I already like wrote, actually, it'll take me 5 seconds. I'll just do it. We're at 3:53. Any questions before continue? I'm just gonna quickly match the textures. Just quickly fixing that. So that's a quick way to apply tree textures. Okay, and then I put two trees in there. So what will be a good technique to do is to mix and match your tree textures. So instead of just putting one single tree texture, maybe put 2 different kinds. So that's why I put them in 2 layers. So what we'll do is we'll just set this to be, say, tree bark 2, and we'll just create a new custom. So I'm just gonna do this real fast. Everything I'm showing you here is stuff that you've already seen already. What I'll just simply do is I'll just choose another one of these textures. I won't put the bump map on it. Honestly, it looks fine. We'll just leave it at that for now. This is the woods. Again, I would encourage you all to not skip steps, but now where we're at is we are at this this stage right here. Let me turn these people off. Because we basically have, let's delete. Well, I guess we'll just move Pinocchio over here. Let's do that. Okay. So we now kind of have like a little scene that we created. If I render this in Enscape, let's just have this kind of model open. Let's go to Enscape and then just hit the run Enscape button to see how that looks. Okay. Again, Enscape is a really nice tool. I never had this tool when I was in school, and it's like one of those things where in school, I always had to use like V-Ray or Mental Ray or these CPU processing intensive rendering tools that were just really annoying to use. This is so easy to use, and honestly, it's in my opinion the way to go, because it's so easy to do, because it's essentially just runs alongside Rhino. What you can do is, if you set the two windows side by side, if you choose this little button right here, this little button right there, that basically matches the cameras for both of them, so that you can view the model at the same time as the rendered version. So it's just a really nice, handy way to visualize the work that you're doing. So if I zoom into this here, you kind of see this is where we're kind of at if the design. So we've kind of modeled the textures of the deck here. We've sort of modeled the background of the forest. So it's okay. It's getting there, but unfortunately, you guys went into a swamp, and the swamp is not this dry, and so there's like just a constant pool of water everywhere. And even if there's no pool of water, you'll walk somewhere and you'll just like step into a pool of water because it's a swamp. I believe, as I think Savannah said, like the swamp eats people alive, and yeah. So in order to create that eating people effect, we need to create a pool of water in here. So let's do that. So let's close Enscape temporarily. Let's go into here, and what I created in here is this just a flat plane. I'll call it water surface. And so all this is, if I move this up and down, you can see this is just basically a rectangle that matches the extents of this model here. And because it's a flat plane, as it intersects with the topography of the surface, it creates these little pools of water. If you move it higher, the water gets higher. If you move it lower, it creates little pockets of water here and there. So it's just a really nice, easy way of creating little pools of water in the model. So this by itself is fine, but we need to turn this into water. And so the way we do that is we need to, number one, give it reflection, so that it reflects the surface piece here on top. And then number two, we need to give it that water wavy look to it. And so the elements that allow us to achieve this effect is, if I go into the water surface material options right there, let's just create a new material. We'll call this one swamp water eater. It's like swamp water eater. So what we do is we create a custom material, right? And then right here, there's a color and a gloss and a reflectivity. So let's give the color for water. I recommend actually like a dark gray or a black. Let's do black for now. And then just take gloss and just go all the way to the right, and then take reflectivity and just move all the way to the right. Then click OK. You see you've basically created a glossy surface. If I now open Enscape, see what happens is that it should have created a reflective plane. I think it did. Oh, it's there. Oh, you know what I think is happening right now? It's transparent. Let me see. Okay. I think this is something that Enscape does. It's the same thing as like grass, I think. If you like name the material grass, it like does something to the material. So instead of calling it swamp water, I'll just simply call this one swamp. I'll remove the A and the E. There we go. So again, this is like Enscape being too clever. It's like Enscape saying like, oh, you named this material water. Do you want me to help you make it look more like water? When actually you just want to say, stop, Enscape, stop. So
with the unit side of like Enscape, can you like export them as GIFs so your model kind of moves if you want a
GIF. Like, well, you can export video from Enscape. I don't know if you can export a GIF. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not some kind of answer every question. I don't know the answer to every question. I'm just a guy. So, all right. So that's just be clear. That's my default joke to everyone. Like whenever people like, what's going on? I'm just a guy. Like there's nothing special about me. Say so. So this looks fine, but we want to give this that kind of water look. So what we do is we add what's called a normal map. So in the box folder, there are these normal maps right here. This is what a normal map looks like. Basically, it's a map that kind of like it's an aspect map. Basically, if you remember like an aspect analysis, it's north, south, east, west. That's what the colors represents. That's what a normal map is. So you can just download these off the internet. I'm giving you two water textured normal maps. There's this one right here, and there's this one right here. So you can apply these to the texture of this here. So let's just click on the texture here, and then in the bump normal right there, just put in one of those two normal maps. Let's choose this one called water new height. That one. Click open and click OK. And we should see now is that water now has that kind of ripply effect to it, because essentially what it's doing is it's reading that normal map. It's kind of like adding that like subtle effect to it. So what's nice about this now is that the reflection in the water has now that nice little ripply effect to it. So it's not as smooth and plain, it's just a little bit more randomized. And then what you can do here as well is, you can take that normal map, you can tile it as well. So same exact thing previously, where you can select this surface here, go into the options, and then in the UVW right now you can see it may be repeating by 2 and 2, but you can take that and do 3 and 3. You see what happens, it just tiles it even more, so it just gets even more of a ripple effect. And then what you can do as well is you can go into the surface here, go into the normal map option there, and then down here, there is a multiplier right here. So at the very bottom of the image settings, there's a multiplier button. Right now it's at the 1. So just put that to like 0.5. Then hit OK, and you'll see that what we'll do is it'll just take the intensity of this and just like reduce the intensity of it. So I click OK, and then click OK, and there we go. You see how the intensity of that ripple kind of evened out. So that is how we get to this point here, which is to basically create the swamp water. And then what you can do as well, like right now the water is like this black water. Maybe you want to really go for that swamp look. So then what you do is you go to this color here and just give it that nice brown swamp color, because there we go. It's kind of like a little brown color to it, because as we all know, swamp water is just full of brown, just mud. So if you do your studio project rendering and you have blue water in it, you'll instantly drop your grade from an A to an F. So let's just draw the line right there. Blue water is not realistic in the swamp. All right, that was pretty easy, right? I showed you how to model. I mean, I didn't show you how to model this exactly this deck element here, but again, the modeling tools I use to model this were the same exact modeling tools I used in last week's tutorial. The ground surface here, I showed you the way to create that undulating plane. The trees, I showed you how to do that. Water surface like that. You're 75% of the way there with this this model. So that's good. And then the last thing you do, obviously, is you go in and add in some scale figures. So in here, let me just see if I have that turned on. Where do my layers go? Here. In Enscape assets, there's a scale figure. So if you just turn that on, you see you have these two dudes. So I found two Enscape dudes that I really liked because they're both holding a coffee. Because that's what you do at swamp. That's what we do at a swamp. Is you grab your coffee and you walk, 15 miles or however far deep in the swamp you go, and then you drink your coffee, right? So I'm really knocking out of the park with these jokes today. Okay. So the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna show you guys how to take this and export this out and then compose a very simple section rendering. So the first thing that we're gonna do before you do anything else, you're looking at this model here, it's like, that's great, Frank, that's fine, but could we give it more atmosphere? Can we give it more interest in the way that this looks? You can. And so in the visualization settings of Enscape up there, visual settings, you can go in here and you can adjust all the image settings of Enscape. So if I go to this image tab, you see you got highlights, saturation, color, temperature. Some of these elements, they sometimes do nice things. So like bloom, if I move this to the right, it kind of adds this, like a soft, dreamy look to it. So you might play with this a little bit if you want to have that, a little bit of bloom or not. In atmosphere, there's these options here. I'm trying to see if there's anything here. There's fog, which is a pretty interesting thing. So if you turn on fog, you can see it begins to add this little haze in the image. It's very subtle, but it's easier to see on your screen. It's hard to see on my screen on the monitor, but it's a nice thing you can add. Then in clouds right now, cloud cover in my model sets 100, but if you set this to 0, there will not be any clouds. And anytime you change the sun and sky, there won't be like any moments where it's overcast. So you can play with this setting as well. If you there's two ways to change the sun and the sunlight condition. You can hold Shift on the keyboard and then use the right mouse button, and you can just like drag it and you can change the sun. Or you can on your keyboard, you can choose click the U and I button. They're right next to each other. So if you choose U, it goes backwards in time, and if you choose I, it goes forward in time. Like so. So this part here, the lighting part, is a really useful thing to know, because you're going to want to take your model and you want to give a very dramatic, interesting lighting quality, because that does so much to the realism of the image. If you give it a very bland lighting quality, like let's say just like a very straight on light, straight on light, like that's uninteresting. What you want to do is you want to kind of give it like either like a morning sun, where it's like kind of casting the light, at a stark angle, or maybe even, say, for instance, an afternoon sunset. Like stuff like this is just a lot more impactful as an image, when you can just give it just a very, very stark lighting quality. And the example that I like to bring up a lot is like movie cinematography. So last year, I think it was last year, there was a really, really good movie that came out recently called Nomadland. It won Best Picture. And if you've ever seen that movie, it has literally some of the most beautiful photography of any movie. It just has this really amazing subtle lighting quality where the director kind of like always has the sun in the background and the figure in shadow. It's just a really, basically, let me try to see if I can represent what the director did. It's something like, let's see, it's something like something like that. Like that's kind of like the aesthetic that movie has, is where the light kind of always feels like it's filtering in, and it kind of like creates these profiles in the distance. So like look at photography, look at cinematography as inspiration, because those are your references to make your images look realistic. If you just go for straight on boring lighting, you miss out on the opportunity to be cinematic and really have fun with the lighting of it. So pick a cool lighting condition. Let's just say, for instance, pick something like that. Now to create a rendering, here's what you do, or to create a diagram. You're going to want to like match the angles in both of these models so that you have a matching perspective in both of them together. So the way I would recommend do that is to first set up your safe frame in Enscape, so you know that when you export the image, that's exactly what it looks like. This is the exact ratio. So the safe frame is this button up there. You can adjust the safe frame by going to the visual settings and going to the output button there. And then in the resolution options there, you can set your resolution to whatever you want it to be. I set this to be 7,000 by 3,000 pixels. The reason I set that, again, I'm biased towards, me personally, I'm biased towards cinematic aspect ratios, like really long, wide, like cinematic. That's why I choose it like that. So that, if we, let me just do this. If we move this down here, if we move this around, then what you basically do is you try to, somewhat match the, create a perspective, view of your well, let's just do something like that. And then, so that's your angle. And then what you do is, once you like your angle in Rhino, you can either create the view in Enscape, but I'll just show you how to create the view in Rhino. Just go to this name views button right there, and hit save. And then it's going to save this view and just give it a name. We'll call this one section view. So now you have that section view saved there. And so now what we can do is, once that's saved in there, first thing to do is obviously you save your actual model itself so that you don't lose anything. So let's save that first. And then what you can do, and I'm sorry, I know you guys gotta run to the airport or whatever, but when you guys gotta run to the airport? 1 a.m. Okay. Okay. We'll wrap up in about 10 to 15 minutes. So we're almost done. So what we can do is, once you have your view selected and you have the view saved, just export the view. So the view export option in Enscape is called the screenshot button. It's very unflattering. They should call it just the render button, but it's called the screenshot button. So you choose screenshot. Before you hit screenshot, make sure that you have in your output settings this box here checked. Because what that does is exports a few of the ID channels, which makes it easier to like adjust this in Photoshop later. So check that box, then choose screenshot, and then just save it to like your desktop, give it a name, call this one view, save. This will take about a minute. Any general questions? It's pretty easy, right? Yeah, so modeling your detail in 3D and then putting in context, it's actually not that hard if you can just know the steps to it. What I will warn you guys on is, and I don't know if I should say this in the video. Let me pause this video. Pause share or pause recording. I love everything about everyone, and I have nothing to complain about. So let's close this Enscape because we've finished rendering it out. And let's wrap up this tutorial that is positive on a positive note, because on a positive note. What we need to do is we have the rendering portion, but now we want to just export a little bit of line work out of this. So what I'm going to show you guys is a few techniques you can use to do that. One technique you probably already, for those who use Rhino already, probably know what I'm going to say is like this tool called Make 2D, which allows you to take a model and basically render out simple 2D line work that looks really nice, and you can just edit it in Illustrator later. Another technique is to actually how to take this image here and put dimensions on it, and then have those dimensions show up in your model. So what I'm going to do this as I'm going to turn off a few of the layers. I'm going to leave this is the design, so I'll leave the design on, but I'll turn off all the background stuff first. Let me create a new layer first. I'll call this one dimension. I think we can wrap up about 5 minutes, so should be pretty quick. Let's turn off all these other things here. So we just have the model here. So with dimensions selected, what you want to do is you want to go to, say, for instance, one of the orthographic projections, like top, front, right, left. So down here, let's go to the front view, like here. So you can actually see the elevation of the section, or the model. And what you can do is you can add dimension by going to this dimension button here and choosing one of the dimension options: linear dimension, line dimension, rotated. Linear and a line will probably cover you for 9 times out of all the dimensions you need to make. So let's just choose linear dimension. And then basically what you do is you just choose the top of, say, for instance, this element here, and then maybe choose the bottom of, say, for instance, this element there. Then just drag it out. And then you have a simple dimension. If you select this dimension right here, you can edit the style of the dimension. So with that selected, go to the properties button. You can have the dimension settings there. I would highly recommend you edit the dimension settings. If you just leave this dimension as its default, it creates a really ugly looking dimension annotation. Go into the edit style button here, change the font to a nice attractive font. It defaults to like Arial, which is the most basic you can get. I like going for one of these more modern sans serif fonts like Roboto. You can have fun with it. Maybe make it bold or whatever. So and then also in the let's see where it is, the arrows right here, you can choose the arrowhead, how this looks right here. So right now it's set to be a tick, but you can choose any one of these other options here. They're a lot more interesting than what it defaults to, which is this arrow. I don't like that one a lot. So at least choose a tick, if you ask me. If you choose the arrow, your grade will go from an A to lower than an F. You'll go to a Z, okay? A Z doesn't exist, but it exists in my class. But just to show what it looks like, you can like choose like an arrow like so, and you see it just changes, right? That's not bad either. So the nice thing about this is if you draw the dimension in the projected view like this, if you go to the section view, it still shows up right there. And then if you like rotate it around, the dimension is still kind of like, hovering over the model. So it's a nice effect. To have the text like you see here kind of like stay planar with the camera, what you need to do is in the settings of the text here, because this will not be default, is you need to go to, let's see, the text. Make sure these are checked to horizontal to view right here. I think that's it. As we'll have work sessions later, and if you guys aren't seeing that, we can work on you guys one-on-one, but it should look just like that. So you can do that let's just do a few quick more dimensions. Let's go to front view, let's do another dimension. let's just go from this to that, for instance. That to that. Let's go from that to that. So that's just a few basic dimensions. Let's also do maybe, for instance, this right here as an example. And then you can see how that looks. So you see how in the section view, like depending on where you clicked on, it either puts it to the in some plane or another plane. So what you want to do is select your dimensions here, and you want to set that all to be on the same plane and set on a plane that makes sense. And so if these dimensions are set right here, it covers the detail. So you want to put these dimensions like here, so it's not covering the detail. So what you can do is you can use a set point command, type in set point, and then that allows you to like set the plane of these points to a single plane. So this is the Y plane right here. So choose set Y. Then you can just basically set that there. And then it says like the set board command broke history on 4 objects. That's fine. Basically, that just means it's no longer directly linked. That's fine. It did its job. So just do the same thing. This guy right there. And then what you can also do is you can like create dimensions and on different planes as well. So let's create one more dimension and then we'll export this out. So I'll show that it's like, I'm gonna go to the top view. So create a dimension. Create a dimension of this basic plan right here. So now you have a dimension of this plane and that plane. So it's just a nice way to represent the design in 3D. That wasn't so hard, was it? It's easy. So you can put dimensions and measurements on your drawings. So far in our studios, 0 dimensions, or if there are, I haven't seen them. But you gotta put measurements on your drawings, because literally measurements is what we do. It's a layout plan. You gotta tell the contractor how much, how wide, how long of a element you're designing. So you just gotta get used to putting dimensions on your drawings. Okay, so then we can do, let's export this out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a layout view. So down in the bottom of Rhino, create a layout view by clicking this little plus icon right there. Choose new layout. And then what I'm gonna do is we're just gonna create a page size that sort of matches the resolution of the rendering that we output. So if you remember, we outputted a 7,000 by 3,000 pixel image. So, you can do the math, but you can basically, it matches the resolution of a 28 by 12 inch thing. So that creates a little layout view like here. In the viewport, what you should do is you should turn on the control points and just make sure it matches the extents of the page. And then double click into the view and then choose the section view here. So if you remember, that was the view that we matched the camera to. That's the view that we picked in Enscape. So that looks good. The number is a little bit big. To fix that, what you can do is you just let me see. You go to the settings here, go to the units, layout. Let me do this again. Right here, sorry. Annotation styles, if you go to annotation, if you uncheck layout space scaling, that fixes that. So now the units are no longer like scaled weird. So that fixes that. Okay, so this will export fine, but then the last step that we want to do is we want to create that make 2D. So what we're going to do is what you can do is if you select the section view here, that creates the angle that you can make 2D. So what you do is you select all the elements of that model. So I'm just click on the base layer right here, just select all sublayer objects, and that select objects. If we type in make 2D, that creates the line work projection of this whole image here. So you can play around with these settings for now, but if you just choose Make 2D with these settings and click OK, this is what you get. Let's just go to the top view. This is what you get. Now you see how this like does this weird trim at the end. It's like, for instance, in the view here, it doesn't have that trim. To fix that, what you need to do is, let's delete this for now. You need to make sure that this viewport that you're working in shows the entire model. One easy trick that you can do, and this is a trick that I learned from a colleague of mine, is that you can drag the viewport out like so, and then click on this arrow here, go to viewport properties. You can actually put in this a specific width and height in there of this viewport resolution. So again, if you remember, we did a 7,000 by 3,000 pixel resolution. You can do that here, but that would just fill out the screen, because the screen isn't that resolution. So we can just do, like, say, for instance, a 700 by 300. So you create a little viewport that matches the resolution of the rendering, and then you can just go back and do the same exact step. With this viewport selected here, just right click on that, select objects, make 2D. Okay, now you can close this. You've done it's done its job, and now this should have the entire thing here. So the way I do is this, is like I group this thing, so it's just one giant thing here. I cut it using Control K or Command K. I go in here, I paste it like so. I move it, I pick a corner, I match that corner with a corner of the model, scale it from that corner that I moved it from, pick another reference point, like say, for instance, that corner right there. There. So now you have your Make 2D line work kind of oriented to the same viewport. And now you can just turn off the model. So now this is just simply the line work and the annotations. So then what you do is you basically take this line work here, right click on the layout, choose print, and print it to a PDF. You can also export to Illustrator. That might be a better way to do it too. I'm just used to this. I can't say this is the best method, but I just like to print to PDF and then I just edit a PDF in Illustrator. But basically you just set it like this. Make sure the page size is set to the same resolution as the output. Make sure you have vector selected and choose print. I'll just call this one, I don't know, end of tutorial. Go to SF now. All right, save. And it should be. Should be somewhere here. So basically, once that's done, you just open that file in Illustrator. So where did I save it? Did I save it? Oh, it's in here. This folder. And you guys know how to use Illustrator, right? Okay. So there you go. You have your line work that you can edit. I'm just going to delete the clipping masks, ungroup the layers. And what I always do is, it's a little bit of a hassle, but I just create a bunch of layers, select a line, select same color. You can grab all the elements of one layer, do the same exact thing for other layers. It's a really quick way to organize your line work. And I create a little shortcut on my keyboard to select all the same elements of a specific appearance. So it's just a nice quick shortcut. But again, you guys are masters at Illustrator, right? Illustrator. Okay. So then the last step is once you have, I'm doing really quickly, but once you have everything sort of there. 0.5 black. So nice line work. If your dimensions on there, you can choose the dimensions, give it a nice, maybe a nice dashed line effect to it or something. And then ideally you would do this probably in Photoshop. You can also do this in Illustrator as well, as you can add in the rendering. So that's the last step, is add the rendering. So that's why I'll just do that and we're done. So we'll go in here and go to where did I create the right here, view right here. So this is the output that we created, this view. Maybe the lighting was a bit too dramatic in this, but also what this export's created with these other view channels. So there's a depth channel, but there's also this ID channel. So this just makes like photoshopping it and adjusting like the colors a little bit easier, because you just use the color picker tool to select, you know, different elements of the model. So it's just a really handy output. But what we'll just basically do is we'll just bring this into here like that. And then just scale it to the artboard. It may not fit exactly. Yeah, so if it doesn't fit exactly, you're just gonna like fudge it, but it should match the perspective pretty closely. So you can get to work. So that's kind of like the starting point. I'm not finishing it for you guys, but you can get the point. Essentially, like rendering, line work output, really professional quality, and then take this and you drop it into the template later. So that I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna stop the meetings and stop recording. Yes, and that's the end of the presentation.